So welcome at the daily conference update here in Findhorn at our Climate Change and Consciousness Conference. And today we have again 3 wonderful guests, and we're curious how the day was today. Mike, welcome. You're firefighting from the States. What was the highlight of your day?
Well, I really enjoyed Charles Eisenstein quite a bit. You know, he has a holistic approach, and what I really appreciated was his top priority was to take, intact living ecosystems as part of that living planet worldview and preserve those first and foremost, those large biospheres that still have intact processes that are largely still functional. I really appreciated that. Plus, what we heard from Angaangaq, yours was an admonishment from the indigenous world, and I felt that very strongly, and that moved me quite a bit. Those were my 2 highlights.
Thank you. And Sally Ibbotson, you're a Qigong practitioner.
Hello.
And you have every morning you do Qigong with participants of the conference.
I do, that's right.
What's your highlight?
My highlight today was, again, from the presentation of Angaangaq. My highlight is when he told us that it's too late to stop climate change, and although that was very emotional and traumatic for us in the room, I went away with a sense of clarity about where we should be putting our energies, and that's into building a new way. So that was my highlight.
Thank you. John Angaangaq, welcome. You were named twice as a highlight. You were a feral elder from Greenland, and you gave the keynote today, one of the keynotes. What was your highlight of the day?
For me, the highlight was that to being greeted with a hug by people. I think it was so connecting, so deep within. And then walking down the street and seeing people touching the heart when they meet me. It's like my heart opens up and I want to go and give them a hug. And it's so beautiful that people just open their arms to receive me. It's like I'm no longer alone on this earth. I've been around the globe many times, and then where people don't even see me or recognize me, and then all of a sudden in Findhorn people touch the heart as I go towards them. I don't touch them, I don't talk to them, they touch the heart and we connect.
Beautiful.
It was so beautiful that finally coming to a place where literally they recognize their own beauty.
Beautiful, yeah.
So that's from a highlight.
Yeah. So you gave the talk today, and I think you told a lot. I would like to pick 2 things out of the talk and talk about that. The first one was, like you said, at one point you said, like, it's so sad to watch people who live day in, day out without celebrating their own life and beauty. Once your mom told you, like, you have to bring the wisdom of the Eskimo people to the world. What can we learn from your wisdom about this fact? How can we learn to celebrate our own life and beauty?
You know, I grew up in a world where there's a lot of ceremonies. Day in, day out, there were ceremonies. You find a little feather of a little bird and celebrate it. You hold it and you greet it both sides and you bring it to your heart. Say, look what I found. Celebrating that a little bird in a flight lost a feather, and then you picked it up with honor and then show it to the world. Look what I found. A feather represents that I can learn to soar. I can never learn to fly, but I can learn to soar within myself and to realize that I am immense within me. Every one of us are immense within us. And we celebrate that just with a little feather. And then imagine when you find an eagle feather, which is even greater degree, because the eagles are the ones who flies highest upon us, our heads, closest to God, as they say in English. And you celebrate it with such beauty, because you are worth celebrating every single day. Every one of us are.
So when you see the feather, you also see your own beauty.
I see my own beauty.
Yeah. And this is how what I can learn is like I can do it with every object which I see in the street, with a person or a flower.
Yeah. The simple flower which comes to you. Remember, you and I, we live in the darkness of the world. But when you see a flower, that's you looking at yourself opening up to the world in which you live.
Yeah. You also touched on the darkness today.
Yeah.
When you said because you started to tell the story that the ice was melting. You say like, I'm from the country with the big ice, and the big ice is melting. And one day you went to all the three directions of the hole, and you said, it's your fault, and like you didn't listen. Why you didn't listen? And I felt it when you said it. I felt discomfort. I felt uncomfortable because it's a challenging question for me. But I also think it's. I would like to listen, and I would like to give you a space to say like, why is it so important to point that out, to tell that story?
Because we have done so many things in this world. We many of us. Remember, almost 8 billion of us now, and we only have one little Earth to live on. And within that Earth are just you and me, not just you and me. There are many other people. Then we have the animal world, where more than 50 other species disappears every single day. And then at the same time, the plant world, which is so stunningly beautiful, who flowers before our own eyes and heart, who gives us their beauty so we can celebrate ourselves. But we kill them off, species after species. And then it's like we become only this species and that species. Because it's getting smaller and smaller. And in the mineral world, we take everything away from Mother Earth, and we don't see the beauty of the mineral world anymore, because everything is taken away. And so it becomes really monotonous. Only this, only that, only this, and only that. It's like, have you ever been to China where you see lavender fields upon lavender fields? It looks so stunning, but after a little bit, it becomes monotonous. Because then we don't see your beauty, then we don't recognize your beauty, and we don't accept your beauty. We don't accept ourselves. That's what it is so important. That it's too late now. We cannot do anything anymore, and I believe the elders, that rather than the scientists. And the elders long ago said it's too late. But we still had to live. What are we going to do as we live? What should we do? Celebrate your life.
Is that the thing you want us to hear? Celebrate your life?
Yeah.
Beautiful. We will come back later. Okay. Sally, you are a Qigong practitioner. These are like heavy conversations, and like life of the world is in a desperate state on a certain level. So how can Qigong help us to live our lives and deal with that kind of problems?
Thank you. So I'll just explain that Qigong is very much like the better known Tai Chi. It's one of the strands of Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine. And those strands are acupuncture, movement systems like Tai Chi and Qigong, and herbs as well. But Qigong is simply a movement system. It works very much on connection with the earth and with the elements, which I believe we'll talk about in a moment. And so it draws on what's called the energy of the earth, really, to allow us to open and heal ourselves, specifically in times of change. And that can be any change, not just climate change, but moving of house, moving of location, change of relationship, any change. It allows us to self-soothe. I would say that's the fundamental thing about Qigong, is it's a self-soothing practice. So we take control for our own reaction to life. Specifically, we can change our nervous systems from the fight and flight response, which is going to be, I think, dominant in times of climate havoc, to a place where we take control of our health, so we can calm ourselves. If we don't calm ourselves, we leave ourselves open to disease, to lower immunity, and to less well-being and less ability to survive well, I'd say.
For me, it's such a new way of thinking. I've been doing yoga or Qigong like here and now, but that there's like Qi energy around us, and that because I did the practice this morning with you, but it's really like making a difference in my body. Like everybody can do it, right?
I'm really pleased to hear that it's making a difference, and it seems very easy. I think a little like shamanism. It's something that seems to be almost in our DNA, so even beginners in Qigong seem to be able, after a short time, so let's say we did about 45 minutes this morning, and I think everybody felt at the end of that a tangible feeling of this thing that we call qi, which is commonly known as energy. That's in Chinese medicine, that's a huge subject, but I think energy is the nearest that we get to what qi is. And at the end of practice, I think people can really feel a sense of having moved something in the body, and having done that oneself, both using the mind and this connection that we constantly remind ourselves of in Qigong between us and specifically the earth. And once we've got that connection, then we can call in all manner of other elements, fire, metal and water. Yeah, that's right. It's very simple. It really is very simple.
And as you said, like it uses a model of the 5 elements to describe the human relationship with nature and like the human body itself. Can you explain a bit like about why you love that model, and also like how it can help me improve my own health?
Of course, yeah. And so the 5-element theory is a specific part of Chinese medicine, but I think a part of all traditional medicine in some shape or form. Chinese medicine is based on the observation of nature, and the 5-element theory came about because if we observe nature, we find that we have 5 elements. We have water, wood, earth, metal and fire. Metal is sometimes air in some traditions. That we can say that broadly speaking, that's how nature functions. I think Mike will talk in a minute about a bit more about the relationship between fire and earth, for example. And so in ancient, and it is very an ancient model, thousands of years old, we would have shamans who were also perhaps farmers and doctors looking at this system, which we call nature, and seeing how it worked together. So rivers would flow, and perhaps then they would get dammed, and then they would unblock themselves, and rainfall would come, tributaries would flow, and nature takes care of that with this intelligence that was observed. And because perhaps of a philosophy and an experience that the human being is part of the landscape, there is no difference in Chinese medicine between us and the earth, that 5-element theory can also be applied to human beings. For me, it's a very simple model, and so for my own health, I can say that if I learn very simply what, let me say, for example, if the element of wood is damaged in me, either chronically or today, I haven't got a very good and healthy wood element, then I may have difficulty in making decisions, in strategizing, and just observing that in myself. I can do simple exercises, stimulating various parts of my body to up the wood element and bring everything back into a little bit more of balance. There are of course long-term treatments, and so not all of this is comes from daily practice, but that's the fundamental idea.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Mike, you work with one of the other elements, fire. You have been a firefighter the most of your life, but now you are not only a firefighter but also a fire lighter, as she said. Can you say something about? Well, let me go. You live in a state where there's a lot of fires. And it's also a thing of climate change, that there will be more fires and fires in the world. So there will be a kind of a sense like, oh, we need to fight those fires. Right. Can you give your take on that? Like, what is the best way to fight those fires?
Well, what I'd like to say is we need to try to not fear fire. That's driving a lot of the increased perception, the lived experience of people that are going through hurricanes and floods and fires, and it's bringing about a lot of fear and an increased awareness about climate change, and in that respect it's good. But as you said, I worked with fire for a long time throughout my whole career, and I probably spent more time facilitating fire than I did putting fires out. I helped manage wilderness fires, lightning fires that occur naturally up at the high elevations and down around structures, and in the lower country we did a lot of prescribed burning. In North America, when the Europeans first came into that continent, there are many times as more fire than we have now. So even though we're seeing increased fire due to climate change, before European settlement, there was by a couple of orders of magnitude more fire. There came about a fire suppression ethic because of the commodification of timber, and the timber barons of the era saw these large fires burning that were both natural and human caused, and they brought an end to that. They brought into being the U.S. Forest Service and Smokey the Bear, if you're one of the biggest, most popular marketing campaigns in the U.S. history, and they essentially eradicated fire from the landscape, especially cultural burning by many of the indigenous people. In fact, in the Klamath Mountains, the men of the Karuk tribe were arrested and put in jail for arson because they were practicing their cultural traditions with fire, and then their children were put into orphanages. So in that respect, when fire was taken away from the landscape, it was taking fire away from those people as well. So I've been able to work with them and bring cultural burning back. That's really only been since the advent of ecology, the science of ecology in the 60s. Do we know more about the regenerative and important effects of fire?
What is the importance of fire?
Well, in particular, take, for example, the giant sequoia tree. A giant sequoia cannot regenerate without fire. Its seeds are serotinous, and that means that it takes heat from a fire to open the seed. I really liked your sense of tradition or celebration of the blowing the seed, because, you know, a single seed from a giant sequoia tree needs fire to create and prepare a mineral soil and ash bed for that seed to drop into, and that seed may go, you know, with just a thought from Gaia for as many as 1 million days to the largest organism on the planet, just about. I mean, there are taller trees, the coastal redwood, and there are older trees, the bristlecone pine, but the giant sequoia only exist with their origins in fire. So if we want future generations to be able to walk amongst these giant trees, we will need to ensure that fire persists in some of these landscapes, particularly wild landscapes away from communities.
Well, what would you say? Because if I am in a house and I have a risk for a fire, I rather not would like my house to burn down. So how do we deal with it?
I think we focus our fire suppression energies more right around communities, right near homes, and we allow natural fire or prescribed burning out in the wildlands and further afield. Actually, prescribed burning can be done. I've done prescribed burning right next to multi-million-dollar homes to help protect those homes in the event of a fire. So rather than, you know, our war on fire is literally a war on nature. You know, some of the damage done by modern fire suppression, which so many of the folks involved in that, you know, see themselves engaged in some epic battle between humanity and nature, which we know is wrong-headed. And bulldozers will tear up, for instance, spiritual sites from indigenous people where the medicine people used to walk up to the top of a mountain. We use ridge lines to contain and control fires, and we'll drive a bulldozer right up that ridge line, and there may be a stack of stones or a grove of trees that mean nothing to the firefighters, but they have deep spiritual significance to some of the indigenous people. So we need to work around that, and we need to use fire as much as we can and not feed more into this war on fire because of our fear of fire in the face of climate change.
Yeah. So you brought up the topic, like it's a fight against nature. And I feel like that's a topic that comes really much up in this conference as well. Like, are we one with nature, or are we separate from nature? So I would like to open the conversation about that topic. Maybe Angaangaq, maybe you can say something about it. Are we one with nature, or are we against nature? Do we have to survive from nature?
You know, it's such an interesting question, because often it looks like we want nature. But I keep coming back to what Annika said, my grandmother says, because as a 10-year-old girl, she went to a big mountain. And up north, where you can see to the beginning of the curvature of the earth with your own eyes. Not in London, where you can only see a few kilometers. But you can see, that means my grandmother, as a 10-year-old girl, she could see 450 kilometers with her bare eyes. That's a very far distance. And then when she looked on the other side, she could see another 450. She could see 900 kilometers with her own bare eyes, and you can still do that at home. Then she felt that she could see the world. And then that she felt that we are one in the same world with Mother Nature. I am Mother Nature. But we live like we are not part of the Mother Nature. It's so interesting, that concept of not living in the nature, because if you go to London, most people will never see a farm. Most people will never see a cow or sheep or chicken, but they eat them every day, and they don't connect to that. And so it becomes really difficult to realize that we are one and the same. We are part of the nature. Animals are part of the nature, plants are part of the nature, minerals are part of the nature, and then the water and the fire and the air, we're all the same, but we avoid it. It's just like...
Yeah. So it's very difficult for modern people to connect with that, with nature, and to feel part of nature.
Yeah.
How could we feel one with nature? Because I have the experience inside of me, I just have to reconnect, isn't it? Like, how can I do that?
Yeah. You know, for me, that I travel, and then I go home to renew myself. I go to my land, which is now UNESCO Heritage Land, which is so interesting that UNESCO accepted the teachings from my grandmother and made it a sacred land for generations to come, which is now my land. I go there so I can lay down on Mother Earth.
You lay down on the ice or on the ground?
I sleep on her. I sleep on her inside my teepee, and then I get renewed by that enormous energy Mother Earth has. And then I go into the wilderness of the Chandra, where there's a silence. The loudest sound you will ever hear in your life on this earth is a silence. That's the loudest. It's not the concert of the Beatles, you know. Yeah. It's not that concert. No, it's the sound of the silence, which is the biggest sound you could ever imagine to hear. That's where I go home and renew myself. And then when I come to other places, that I hear this traffic, constant traffic. I hear the constant airplanes, and I hear constant chit chatter of the world. Then I go home. I connect to the Mother Nature, and I feel this incredible power of silence. I am one and the same of the earth. I am part of it, you are part of it, but most of us never get connected.
Sally, do you have any thoughts on this?
I do, yes. Firstly, coming from London, I completely agree that most of it is plastered over and the earth is not available to us. However, I would say that there are some great green spaces, and my experience is that even in the parks and green spaces in London, it's possible to connect with nature and with trees.
How do you do that? Like, how do you connect personally with
well,
nature?
I'd like to just recount a similar experience, really, in my mid-20s, which really drew me into teaching Qigong, not just practicing it. And it brought home to me how very connected we are, actually. And that was I was driving into the West Country from London, and it was a very stressful journey. I didn't quite know where I was going. I was driving a very heavy camper van, which was not even a VW conversion. It was some kind of stupid conversion. So it was a very heavy van. I had to do lots of pickups on the way, and I didn't really know where I was going. It was very dark, and I slept in the camper van, and I knew that I had been very, very stressed and pushed, really, and was very overwhelmed, and then had slept on a strange bed. And when I woke up, I walked out of the camper van, which is a mobile home, and I couldn't find my feet. I couldn't walk straight. Something had happened to my vision, so I tried to look straight ahead, but I was looking to the side, I was veering to the side, and it was potentially very frightening. Now I'm very blessed because I have always had a connection with my body and nature, and I kind of knew not to get too frightened. I knew a bit of Qigong, and I did self-soothe, but it was almost like an animal reaction to go to the piece of earth that was less disturbed. So it was rural. I was deep in rural Dorset, I think. And I almost like an animal, I went towards the trees, the forest. I don't think I even took my shoes off. I just stood and did 5 minutes of simple breathing and simple Qigong. But my experience was that in my need, everything around me changed, and I felt the channels open to what was needed. It was almost out of my it was out of my control, I would say. It was something else, something other. Not just the earth, but the trees responding as well, and I was really just being, and it's hard to describe, and perhaps it's more of a felt sense of that that people need, but it was very, very powerful to me to feel that connection in actuality, and of course after 5-10 minutes I was fine and really, really grateful. Yeah.
Mike, you have any experiences of feeling one with nature? Do you agree that we're one with nature?
Well, I would. Although the modern firefighting and our war on fire, the practices and rituals we have are very, very much those of militarism, honestly. But as far as myself personally, the ways that I kind of get in touch with nature would be walking through an old-growth forest, down amongst these ancient trees that have been on the planet for thousands of years, and I'll find a stump blackened from a fire, and you can literally crawl down inside of that stump and think about the process of death and rebirth that comes from fire. I'll give one other great experience. Probably one of the best I've ever had was I was burning in an open oak savanna and up on the top of the Klamath Mountains. And it was a place where the indigenous folks had burned, and we were burning for those same reasons. And as the fire moved through the grass, there were insects, grasshoppers, just coming out of the fire, trying to get away from the flames. And it was just moving across the field. And at the same time, there were raptors, there were birds just swooping in and out of this moving mass of insects. And they were feeding on those grasshoppers that were moving out ahead of the fire. And it was just this moving wave of death and life. And it was very powerful, in that it really taught me a lot about the power of fire for renewal.
Mm-hmm. So if we agree on that one of the key things to do is reconnect with nature, what kind of advice would you give to people to have that experience? Because I think only with an experience you can actually maybe start to shift that idea. Sally, what would you?
I would say that one of the biggest things is for us to slow down. Earlier in the conference we had the image of the tortoise, and that the earth is saying, treat me slow or be slow. And I'd say slowing down so that we can hear things and see things properly is a way that we can celebrate. We also know that the observer in quantum physics is just as important as that he or she observes and can affect. So literally observing something with love and awe and wonder, to me is one of the quickest ways to connect.
Mike, what would you say?
Restate the question. I'm sorry.
What would you advise to people Like if I want to reconnect with nature, what
I
would
think
you
I
advise
think
me?
more ceremony and ritual. That was something that was in your talk today that I really appreciated. You know, I think if we can bring more ritual, more ceremony back into our lives in a wild nature kind of context, I think that's one of the best ways to reconnect.
Angaangaq?
You know, working with the body, you know, it's just so important that that when you're in a city that you don't really connect to the earth, where you're living on the asphalt and cement. But when you go out to the Mother Nature, it's so different to step on her. And in terms of the fire, it's really interesting, the beauty of what you described of my family, of the continent you work on. We brought in to Greenland the sacred fire, where they say that when the world needs it most, the sacred fire will come home. But otherwise, the only fire we had, it was a seal fad burning. That's the only fire we had. And then I called to the world to bring in their sacred ashes from sacred fires. And 247 sacred fires ashes came in to Greenland from all the continents of the world. And my uncle and my great aunt used it as a foundation for return of the sacred fire. So when you go home to my land, you will see ashes from 247 sacred fires around the globe. And it's so amazing. And my grandmother's home, there's a bundle like that of earth from outdoor fire they have held for more than 5,000 years. It has become a mound like that. And because ashes brings new life, exactly the way you described it. And it is so interesting that the sacred fire came home through the ashes of the sacred fire from around the globe. And the beauty of that is that it connected us. It connected every one of us, no matter where we came from or the world.
And is sacred fire something different than normal fire?
Absolutely.
What is sacred fire?
The normal fire is that you cook with it, you heat yourself, and you see the light during the night. That's it. Sacred fire is burning in your heart. That's the one which is so important. But imagine, I often imagine myself that I must have some fire in my heart, and I imagine a candle in the wilderness of New Delhi. I mean, it was big. I just came from there about a month and a half ago. In the wilderness of New Delhi of 70 million people, I felt like I was a little candle because I connected with people. I touched people, and people was, I just touched them, and I became that candle, the fire in my heart. And it was so interesting to get a hug from complete strangers just because I looked at them.
Is that a way to lit my own sacred fire? Making contact with other people?
Yes.
Okay. Can you say something about it? Like how can you lit the sacred fire?
How can you lit the fire? Close your eyes to this world and open within. Then you will become aware of that candle in your heart, and you will become brighter and brighter and brighter. And then it goes beyond your control, because then people can see you, because they can see your smile, they can see into your eyes, and you can connect with people. And the connection is the most important thing we have amongst ourselves in this world. Not only with the humans, but with the animal world, with the plant world, a mineral world, the water, or the elements of the air and the fire.
Yeah, but if I close my eyes, I don't see anything outside anymore. So what do I do when I close my eyes?
That you find your light.
You find your light.
Yeah. Close your eyes to this world and open within. And there reside that light. Practice, practice, practice until you become a master of it.
And it aligns beautifully with the first principle we have in Findhorn, which is like inner listening. Close your eyes, become still, and listen to the small voice within. And I think on that note, it's a beautiful end of our this daily conference update. So thank you for watching. Tomorrow we have a new day of our conference, and we will be here again on 5:30 with 3 new guests. So thank you, and have a nice evening.